Welcome to Strength Chat Podcast, presented by Kabuki Strength. Introducing your hosts, Chris Duffin, the mad scientist of strength, Rudy Cadlow, mature athlete and coach, and the wizard of training himself, Brandon Sen.
Welcome to Strength Chat with your host, the mad scientist of strength. Did I screw all that up, Rudy? You look at me like, oh man,
you're there.
Oh, thanks.
You are.
And welcome back.
Self-introduction.
My co-host, Dr. Rudolph, just recently back from shoulder surgery. And to my left, the wizard of training himself, Brandon Sen. So today we've got Kalle Beck of Starting Strongman. Great resource. It's an educational resource for strongmen. He also has the podcast, Strength Talk. Is that correct, Kalle?
Strong Talk.
Strong Talk.
Not to be confused with Strength Chat.
That's what had me all messed up and slow on the intro today. I'm like, too many very like-sounding podcast names, and my head's moving a little slow. Just finished a workout, so. But speaking of workouts, so Kalle is a coach in the strongman field, and again provides educational resources with Starting Strongman. So, Kalle, tell me how you got started with this.
Well, with strongman in general, I just, was perusing the internet and trying to find some new form of, training. Always liked watching strongman competitions, but I think this was like 2007. So it was like the information was not really around at that point to easily know that there's, an amateur division and different weight classes, et cetera. And I just stumbled across it on some message board back then and just started competing in it. It's about it, found, I think I stayed up to like 4 a.m. just Googling different things, trying to find more information. You kind of get led down a rabbit hole and really like the style of training. Not that I was any good at it or anything, but just, through stubbornness and it's kind of like when you decide, when something clicks, like this is what I want to do, whether it's a natural fit or not. And with Starting Strongman, I started competing in the sport for years and years, and there'd be a lot of resources that would put information out on strongman, but nothing was just for strongman, and so like a lot of the basic information was missing. So if someone wants to compete in a sport, like if they want to do powerlifting or CrossFit's a great example, the first thing they're going to do is try to the first question you're going to get is, how do I find a gym? And I found as an athlete, I was getting asked these same questions over and over. So I just started putting, resources like that on my, personal athlete webpage. Like, here's a list of gyms around the country. And then, and just information like that. And just, and here's a video on how to, do a log clean and press. And there really wasn't that much. And it just kind of kept growing. I'm like, well, I think this needs to be something else. Came up with a name, figured it would be good for SEO. If anyone's Googling like how to start strongman, how to do this, it's going to pop up, and just kept putting the information out there from, I think at some point it was a selfish endeavor in some way, just because I was an athlete in as a lightweight, which is 175 pounds. So it's not very well known. And I know if I wanted the recognition and for the sport to grow, so I have more opportunities in it, you need to make more people aware of it and make it more accessible. So I think it started somewhat, you want more attention and accolades for the stuff you're doing as an athlete. I feel, in strength sports, we always have that kind of, thing like, man, no one cares what we do and we work really hard. And then, just it kept growing and growing, and got fired from my job. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I need to make this a full-time thing. And this was about 2006. It's about almost 3 years ago now, and it's going pretty good. Got good amount of traffic every month, and good stable of clients, and hearing good things. And the sport seems to keep growing in conjunction with it. So I think it's all working out hand in hand.
Well, you definitely made a name for yourself in the sport, which is a big deal being a lightweight, right? Because everybody, a lot of people know who the big competitors are, right? The guys on TV, the guys that are
the world's strongest man competitors.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're kind of I wouldn't say, but within strongman, like a little bit of a household name. People know who you are. And I think part of that is another reason we've got you on the podcast here is, we're very big on promoting, educational resources, things that are going to help athletes and coaches be better. And it's a way of giving back, because in the end, much of our sport is a very selfish endeavor. Like, a lot of people go around like talking about how they're this warrior going to battle or doing this stuff. And, oh, it's so hard on my diet. You don't know what I'm going through. And it's like, really, these are all choices. Like, there's people like you're making the choice either to overeat or undereat or, train 4 hours a day or any of this other stuff. And there's people around the world that they can't even fathom that. And so it's really what we do is a bit of a selfish endeavor. And that's why I really appreciate people that are doing something to, more than just their getting out there and in training and competing. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. And likewise, I read a lot of the information and the videos you put out, and it's all helpful. And, seeing people like, we've all learned like Mark Bell's putting out all the info, and you look like that's a great example to follow, someone like that. And, you've done the same, and it's something I wanted to mirror in my own sport to the best of the ability. And like you said, I try to do the same thing where like originally all of this was just on, like kalebeck.com. I went, okay, well, I shouldn't be the only voice that's putting out information. How much does like one person know? And, all of my, what I've learned in the sport was just, from watching and, you go to contests and everyone talks. So everyone can add something. So I wanted to, get other people that have knowledge and share their articles and just raise the awareness on the sport in general. And strongman's a weird sport where the barrier of entry is perceived to be extremely high, because the only interaction people do have with it, like the main way people see it, is seeing, Brian Shaw, Eddie Hall. These guys are 6'2", 6'5", plus 400 pounds, deadlifting 500 kilos. That's all they see. And even the name itself, it's strong and man. So if someone's like, oh, I'm not strong, I'm not a man, you almost like cut off who would want to compete in it in general, even though there's, women's weight classes all the way down to 120 pounds. So it really can be for everyone to some extent. And it's scalable just like anything else, where, an empty log implement's going to be, 75 to 95 pounds, a keg's 35 pounds. Anyone can do some sort of farmer's walk, and they can enjoy that style of training, whether they're going to be world's strongest man or they're going, just to have some fun and adding those movements into their own training to, help them with their daily lives or other sports.
That's an interesting point you make there, as far as like just the adding it into training or being a training method that can be useful for other people. I mean, in our gym, we have some of those 120-pound female competitors in strongman, but one of the things you mentioned, like the farmer's walk there, the farmer's walk is an incredible tool that a lot of people don't realize the value of, like what that can do actually it teaches a lot of postural things very, very well. You've got that balance of left to right. There's so many things going on with that. And, using those implements and tools, and, a lot of people bash CrossFit for this and that. And I think that there's some opportunities for, in that sport, or not sport, but training modality or whatever you want to call it.
It's both
to improve, but they have brought a lot of people to both strongman and powerlifting, right? Because they do, associate with, some real strength training methods, and they incorporate some of that. So have you found that to be true, that, with CrossFit, that there's gotten to be, a little bit more people kind of entering the sport, at least on a training or entry level?
Oh, absolutely. I think at least 3/4 of the seminars I've done have been at CrossFit gyms. And, a lot of my, personal clients, I coach remotely, go to CrossFit. I taught strongman classes at CrossFit gym for a while, and it's a great community when used right. It's just all it is really is people that want to get in better shape and be stronger and more fit and all that, and that's all we really want to do. So it's the same thing. People like to put themselves in their own little camps, like they're special. like, oh, you're a power lifter, so you're better because you can, squat more than this strongman, but, oh, he can load a higher stone, he can load a stone better than you, when it's all really silly. The outside looking in, it's all the same thing: CrossFit, powerlifting, strongman, and all CrossFit's done is just raised awareness for all of it. Because like CrossFit's more broad in general, so I feel like people are going to get introduced to the movements from it, and then people are going to specialize from there. And you've seen it where, if someone doesn't like running 5 miles, but they really like when it's a heavy deadlift day, there's a chance that they're going to want to do more of, powerlifting style training or strongman. And then they're going to find it through there and get introduced to it and add it in their own training. And you just keep seeing that, especially with, there's some really high level competitors in the amateur ranks that started in CrossFit, especially on the women's side as well. So it's only done good things.
They're going to have that moment like you had, right? Where it just clicks and they go, hey, this fits me really well. I want to do it, right?
Right. Yeah. Or they just keep doing CrossFit, but more people are using a barbell and strength training in general. So it can't really be a bad thing as far as I'm concerned.
Let's get into a little bit of meat here so that our listeners got some takeaways. But
sure.
Let's talk about some differences in barbell sport training. Let's say, powerlifting or Olympic lifting and strongman training.
Mm-hmm.
And I might head this direction with Brandon to kind of take over some of this discussion for us.
Yeah. So I guess one thing that our listeners would probably really benefit from is, you as a coach, how do you actually, look to build the novice strongman? So you probably get, especially with your website, Starting Strongman, I imagine you get quite a few people who are really interested in just getting started with it. I mean, like you mentioned, strongman, even more so than powerlifting, is probably really difficult to find facilities that actually have adequate amount of implements and that sort. So how do you start with a novice who comes to you through Starting Strongman?
Yeah, if we're going to say someone who's barely played around with the implements at all and coming to it, like maybe they have, they've done some CrossFit or powerlifting. The main difference is, okay, so they're going to have their strength that they've acquired through doing different sports and doing weight training in general. And now we need to apply those strengths to these specific skills and implements that are in strongman. And how I like to break it down is what makes it harder in a way to program for compared to like powerlifting or weightlifting is with a powerlifting meet, the exact events, how they're going to be contested every time. You're judged on your total of your squat, bench, and deadlift, and you get 3 attempts. All the equipment's standardized, where something like strongman or even CrossFit is non-standard. It could be any sort of combination. I see some weird events in strongman, so you just need to build up the strengths and the basic skills. So it helps to break down strongman contest to what you're generally going to see. There's generally going to be some sort of ground to overhead, so like a pressing event, some sort of deadlift, from in various ways, some sort of moving event like your farmer's walk or your yoke, where you're taking a loaded implement and moving with it, either contested for max weight, time, or distance, and some sort of loading event like your stones, where you're picking up an implement off the ground, loading it onto or over a platform. And there's some other ones in there as well, but that's the basic one. So you take like those 5 skills and then you kind of group each possibility into those, which helps. So we need to work on those. And I kind of if they're not training for a specific contest, I'm going to rotate in the implements usually in 3-week waves, like 1 week farmers, 1 week yoke, 1 week they'll carry a sandbag. They might do log 1 week, axle the next, circus dumbbell the next, and you can kind of rotate it really well with that. And you want to, I'm a big believer in building up your base strength and conditioning with barbell lifts, like the squat, bench, deadlift, press. And for at least the first 6 months, for most people getting into strongman, they just need to learn that new skill, right? So we're not, we're getting better, but they just need to get more time on those implements to get familiar with them, so they know what they're doing, and they're ingraining good habits that you're not going to have to break down and rebuild later on. So just how to properly lift up a stone, getting used to building up more volume in that specific lift. Same with the yoke. Like when you're moving with weight, it's a completely different test of strength than doing a squat. You're driving off. There's unilateral, strength. Using each leg balance. It's completely different than any sort of other walking you're going to do, because you're kind of swiveling at the hips more than breaking at the knee. You're trying to keep your midline stable underneath that weight. So it's very different, and it takes a while to build up that technique. And then once you can kind of start pushing it. But that's the main thing, is just skills acquisition and just building up their general strength and also their confidence, because until they've done a contest or two, everyone gets really nervous.
Even after, I mean,
absolutely.
For however many contests that I imagine you've done, Chris, I mean, I imagine you're nervous for each one, yeah?
Oh, yeah, yep. Some of it starts feeling normal, but there's always that until you get like that first event in, or, it's like the nerves don't kind of start quelling down.
You might learn how to control them a little bit.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, going back to what you were saying earlier, if strongman isn't really kind of a misnomer, and it's sort of pigeonholed the sport a bit, because really there's the activities you're describing require a lot more athleticism than some of the other strength sports, than powerlifting for sure.
Absolutely. I'll take, like, if I want to take someone who has some sort of background, I'll take an NFL lineman over someone who's been doing powerlifting for the last 10 years to make them a strongman any day. Just because they already know how to move, they got quick feet, and teaching athleticism is, I find, a lot harder than teaching someone how to get stronger.
Right.
So if they already have that, and it is, if you watch like Strongman Corporation Nationals was just this weekend, and if you break down the events, it's less like who was necessarily the strongest, but you're doing stuff like carrying like the heavyweights are carrying a 400-pound, like, huge tombstone. It's like, seems like it's almost as big as I am in front of their body for max distance. Like, that's a tremendous, like, that's just taxing everything. Your lungs, your grip, your back, your, foot speed, and then they're doing medleys on top of it. Yeah, it is there's a lot more athleticism involved in it than people would think, for sure.
Well, that's what I've always viewed it as, is a combination of, pure raw strength with athleticism that we don't see in the barbell sports, But, speaking of athleticism, we do a lot, at least in our strength training, with like reviewing people's movement patterns and finding deficiencies and like how we correct it. And I think you're a little familiar with kind of what we do in that manner. Do you have experience with doing anything similar with strongmen?
There's a lot of there's a lot of you see the same thing over and over. When people aren't good at certain movements, like, I'd say one of my specialties on coaching is getting people's log clean and press better. A lot of people struggle with it, and it seems like it's almost always like the same things work. Like, this is what they're deficient in, where you might be able to describe it. You guys might be able to describe it a little bit better on the technical aspect of what it all is, but people have no stability in their shoulders, and especially like their upper back, and getting their whole lats tight to brace for the log, and rear delts, like, because with the log it's different where a barbell, because it's so big in diameter, it's 12 inches around, so it's out in front of your body, so it takes a lot more stabilization in the upper body to be able to press it. Where an axle, they can, so you have to stabilize it. It's out in front of your body, a lot of erector strength, so they're going to be deficient in that. I think most everyone in general.
Yeah, we see a lot of deficiencies in that, in pretty much our athlete population, but our general population as well, is that stabilizing the shoulder girdle, and a lot of it comes, I think, from the environment we live in today. We have a lot of that, frozen back-ish type syndrome, but we get this disconnect between shoulder function and core function. and we lose that stabilization of that shoulder girdle, and which then starts limiting mobility as well. And usually people start seeing an issue when they start, having the mobilization problems and they can't move correctly. But you're going to see it sooner with the stabilizing, right? Because they're not going to, be able to control in that position.
Especially they press the implement out in front. They can't save it at all because it's just an even worse position. And it's really hard to get stronger if you can't even get into the best positions. Like myself, I don't have and never have like the strongest bench press or, raw pressing like that. But my log was always better. I think I worked on, being able to get into the optimal position. Some could say cheating because you're using almost tricks like, having the handles tilted just right, your elbows in the right position, and where, some guy who's
that's just called technique and being smart. So
have you ever seen Chris sumo deadlift?
I have this argument all the time I've made for years, and that is, I've never tried to be the strongest guy. And people are like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I want to lift more. They're like, well, isn't that the same thing? I'm like, no. I outlift people that are stronger than me all the time. And if you change the focus, because if you just think about going in the gym and pounding it hard and becoming stronger, it's not the right mindset. Like, what is the end goal? The end goal is to lift more weights. The end goal is to win that event, right? And getting stronger certainly helps you. So we don't take that away, but don't lose sight of the goal. And there's more to it than just getting flat stronger. Because if you don't do that stuff, you're at a huge disadvantage, right? There's 50 pounds off your log possibly, right? So it's just a mindset thing. I try to.
It's one of the first things we do in the gym when we have a new client or a new athlete that comes in, and I'm sure it's the same with you too, is taking it to the very basics, the whole breathing and bracing strategies. I mean, if you're not braced properly for powerlifting, strongman, any of those events you discussed, then your risk of injury increases dramatically.
Yeah, and the quickest way to regress is getting hurt. So, everyone's worried about like, I'm lifting. I don't want to take a week off. I'm going to get weaker or this, but you get hurt.
Then you're out for 3 months or 6 months.
You're just constantly chasing. I want to be as strong as I was in 2005. Like, you start getting down that rabbit hole, and that's not any fun. I can attest to that. But
strongman is for sure a sport that just chews you up too. Yeah, puts you to the meat grinder.
For sure. And it can get frustrating when you get a client like that, because sometimes I'll get clients that come through and they'll send me some movement, just showing their squat, and I'm like, we got to really rework this, or they don't know how to hinge properly in a deadlift at all, and like they get frustrated because they find out that they're further out from their goals than they thought, but
they're going to be better off in the long run, because you keep deadlifting with that bad pattern. You're going to hurt your back, and you're going to be out for 6 months, 9 months, maybe even years.
Well, that's definitely the mark of a good coach too, is being able to have that conversation with your athlete. A lot of we've had a lot of athletes come from other coaches who are not quite as hands-on in the movement side as we are. And one thing that that's really can be difficult to get through to at first is we need to take 2 steps back in order to take 1 step forward. And being able to have that conversation and push those athletes to that maybe those new areas is really the mark of a good coach, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, actually, Kale's watching the videos and providing. I mean, this is good stuff. A lot of people think that training or coaching, like online coaching, is just like writing programs, right?
I wish.
Sure, have you seen that, right?
I'd have free time.
I know you've seen that with other coaches, right?
Oh yeah, there's people send out a thing, and that's why I don't like to say that's why when people ask me like how much is programming, I it's coaching really, and I go on like a week to week, almost day by day assessment is how I do it, and I think that's really the only way to do it, because training doesn't happen in a vacuum. Of course, you have like your progressions lined out, especially in a sport like strongman where there's so many different variables and events are changed all the time. But you're just constantly reviewing, and the best feedback I can get from a client is just like how that felt, like how the day was, how their mood was, everything like that, more so than I hit this many reps, this many sets. It's like I try to tell them, like, tell me what's going on, like I'm not there. So that's where the disadvantage to remote coaching comes in. But to go back to, when people don't want, it's like sometimes it means losing clients when they don't want to go back to the basics sometimes, and you have to be okay with that as a coach. Like, like we're all trying to pay our bills, but sometimes people don't want to hear that, and they want to do this contest in 6 weeks, and you got to tell them, like, I want to make sure you're doing this for, the next 6 years. And that's just how it is. But you have to be okay with that.
Exactly. They have to be open for coaching. And if they're not, it's just, it
absolutely
doesn't matter that, that it's income. It doesn't matter. Your job.
The last thing you need as a coach is a reputation that you hurt people.
Yeah. It's just short-term thinking in general, which, kind of plagues most businesses, and, most people's training, everything really is not looking at, the long-term goal, how this is going to affect, the next thing and all that. You always got to think the long game in all of this.
Yeah. And so in Strongman, I imagine a lot of, coming from a coaching company as we are, we have a handful of Strongman athletes on our roster, but it's definitely not our primary focus. From the outside looking in, it seems like the general consensus for Strongman interest, a lot of people can figure out, how to get stronger through the bench, squat, deadlift, rows, maybe some pressing and carry variations. But as we whittle that down towards competition, where does that skill acquisition come in from a coaching standpoint? So if we take, maybe the intermediate strongman, what does that training look like 8 weeks or 6 weeks out from a competition? I imagine at that point exactly what your implements are, hopefully what the weights are. At that point, you're probably whittling down maybe some of the squat variations and, very strict barbell movements. What does that actual skill acquisition look like from a coaching standpoint?
Yeah, like we can take someone who would just, maybe they're not going to get top 10, or they have a possibility for nationals that just happened for strongman, like that level of competitor. Once you're getting, like the first blocks of training, you're just, in off season, it's more like accumulation. You're building up volume, overall strength. And as you get closer and closer to a contest, it's going to be more and more specific. Less barbell movements. I'll change movements to something that's not going to be as taxing. Like, we're not going to be low bar squatting right up, heavy right up to a contest, maybe doing some, safety bar. A duffel is a good, is going to help just to, relieve some shoulder pain, or just front squats, just less stress on the low back, lower the volume, still keep them in. But, I almost use like the squat then to just use it like, a couple sets, no really heavier than 80% on like an event day to pre-fatigue the legs before moving events. Cause if you're doing 5-6 events in a 2-day contest, your legs are probably most likely going to be fatigued before you go and do a yoke walk. And then for like, let's say there's a moving event's your second movement and you have a 700-pound yoke. Generally, for the most part, going to be working on, instead of thinking about how much weight you're moving for how much distance, is how fast you're moving in that distance. Because how it's scored is, let's say you have, like a 50-60 foot run, fastest time wins. I don't care if you can if you can do 900 pounds in 40 seconds, or, if you can't move and also in your contest weight 700, that doesn't help, even though like people could think that's stronger. I want you running 8 seconds, because that's going to be like towards the winning time. So we're going to work on, all right, how fast can you move a yoke within 8 seconds, 60 feet? And we'll kind of vary it like that and use that as the parameter, because that's how it's being contested, is how fast it was moved. So we never want to move slow. If you start moving slow, it's a completely different movement. And something like the yoke is so like, God, like doing yoke for contests, like I'd wake up the next day and you're just shot. Like, overloading, putting that much weight over your spine and then sprinting with it. Basically, it's a lot of fatigue that goes into it. So you can train it more often doing a lower percentage, probably generally 70 to 80% of contest weight for the majority of it. And, it's just like, and we'll have a couple, peaking phases where you kind of go within contest weight, depending on your abilities, maybe go slightly above every now and then just to test and also build up confidence. And so if you're doing a log clean and press and it's as many reps as possible in 60 seconds, closer to a contest, you need to work on the cadence and the rhythm a lot. So do a lot of work like we're going to do 3 sets at 80% of contest weight in 30 seconds. How many reps? And try to keep that same rhythm up. 2 sets in 45 seconds, maybe even a couple where we're doing 90 seconds, a little over the time domain. So we're working more, within the actual domains of the contest. We're focused on those versus sets and reps is the main thing as you lead up to a contest.
Yeah, at some point, you don't have to get that much stronger at each implement so much as you have to get better at performing the implement.
Absolutely. That's the difference, especially when you take a contest like nationals where there's going to be, they're like some of the classes had 50, 60, 80 people in one class, and you do a yoke walk 3 seconds slower, you just drop 15 points. Yeah. It's that close between everyone. So you need to make sure that you just have everything dialed in, and you're probably really going to get, weaker if you're taking your 1 rep max in this, 6 to 8 weeks. You're going to get better at those specific events, but you're not going to get, I highly doubt your back squat's going to be higher when you come off of it.
So one of the big differences from powerlifting to strongman is definitely the aerobic component. Do you feel like training the implements themselves kind of take care of that, or do you ever do any specific conditioning work outside of the implements?
Yeah, I'm learning more and more on this, especially doing the strongman coaching for Complete Human Performance and learning. Alex Viada is just he wrote the book on it basically. So, right. But I found big benefits to doing some lower intensity cardio, keeping your heart rate, in the 140 to 150 range for longer distance, because you're going to be better conditioned overall. So if you're still at 90% or 95%, but someone else is gassed going into the 5th event and they're at 75%, even if they're stronger than you, you're still at your 90%. You're stronger now. So there's definitely big benefits to adding in some traditional conditioning on top of the events, because when you're working in a time domain that's very rarely more than 90 seconds, you're not. And also, a lot of these guys are bigger guys in general too, so just for basic health, it's good to do some cardio, because no one wants to die at 40, so right. I'd recommend it.
I hope not. I turn 40 next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a lot of the people who we coach who are interested in strongman have come over from powerlifting. We have a lot of our people who are interested in powerlifting, like, all right, well, it's my off season, so I want to dabble in strongman events. So with a lot of those people that we have, it's very rare for them to have a lot of strongman implements available to them unless they train at a gym like Kabuki Strength or what have you. So I found that a lot of times we have to do a lot of extra conditioning work that's non-implement specific, because we just don't have the possibility to. For the people who are training, who want to do strongman, who train maybe in a commercial setting or a CrossFit gym that doesn't have all the implements they need, is it actually possible, in your opinion, to effectively train for strongman? Obviously, it's not going to, be the best if you don't have all of the implements that'll be in contests. But from a coaching standpoint, how possible is it to actually train for that sport without the implements?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's possible. Like, having all the tools available to you always makes it easier, but you can still progress with what you have. A lot of the time, the people they get too worried about what they don't have when they realize that, you can mimic certain movements. If you break the events down into like the basic movements and how it functions, like a stone load, you're kind of, if you look at it, it's kind of like a stiff leg deadlift into a front squat into triple extension. So you kind of look at it like there, how can what muscles does that hit? How can I mimic and get those specific muscle groups and motor patterns, ingrained in, gym movements? It's not too difficult. And you kind of have to be like, being able to kind of engineering some stuff helps too. Like I never had a car deadlift frame, but I realized that, okay, if I set 2 barbells up in a rack, and I can kind of, I can put a lift on a lever, and I can mimic the movement. And I never had one to train with, but it was close enough. And I don't think I ever placed out of the top 3 at any nationals in the car deadlift. So, I just learned how to do the movement and maybe get, travel that little bit of, like a 2-hour trip to a gym at least once, just to get a little bit of specificity on it beforehand. And, you're good to go. And strong is strong at the end of the day. Conditioned is conditioned. So the better you can do that, the better you're going to be. It has its challenges, but I think there's more access to equipment than ever, and more gyms that have it. There's a whole list of gyms at strongmanmap.com on my website that have the equipment. And yeah, it's just really breaking down the movements and the specific skills into, what is taxed during that, and mimicking it as best as you can.
Thanks to ABC Sports and ESPN, the Strongman, World's Strongest Man, has been televised for 30 years or so, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And people are, just the general population enjoys watching that because they see these amazing feats of strength. But to the average person that may see that and say, God, how would I start? I mean, we've talked about intermediate, we talked about the heavyweights, but say just an average person that hasn't really worked much in the gym, and they came to you and said, I'd like to try this. What would your progression be? What would you tell them mentally? And how would you kind of walk them through and get them started without them getting discouraged along the way?
Well, the great thing about how it's expanded is that there is more, novice or entry level contests and we, in California here, there's a couple of promoters that make sure to put on like at least one contest a year, which is not for the competitor that's been doing this for like 3+ years. It's someone that's just trying to try it out. It's light. People are going to get more reps, and, lowering that barrier of entry. And a lot of the time these, athletes that do that, then they kind of fall in love with it. That part about being kind of scared to just jump in at first is lowered. And, that's really the unique part that makes it harder. Where powerlifting, you get to call out your attempts. So that's pretty easy. You can just tell someone like, well, just work within your means. If you can do the bar, you can do it. Whereas strongman's a little different. Your attempts are called out for you. And they just need to, my advice is always to get as strong as you can on the gym lifts and get as technical as you can on the implements before loading them heavier. And, working within the time domains, like on yoke, on, making sure, 50 feet takes less than 12 seconds helps you do that, because you're not going to be overloading it and taxing your body and, walking like a giraffe, with, 3 times your body weight and just crushing your spine. So, and, they can find a list of events on Starting Strongman and Strongman Corporation and United States Strongman websites. And you just pay attention to the contests that are coming up in your area. And even if you can't do it, this year, that same contest will probably be next year. I remember that's how I started, is there was a contest in like Santa Cruz, and it just happened, and it was going to be like the next October. And I was like, okay, if I train for a year, I could possibly do those within the next year. So even if you can't do it in 6 weeks, you'll be eventually able to do it if you just keep training. Most anyone who's training somewhat seriously for a year or two, there's going to be a novice level contest they can enter. And find a group of people around you is the main thing. Like if you can find a good group, training group, like you guys, you notice if someone's just been training on their own, then they come out there, they're going to get better just because you're surrounding yourself with the right people. So surround yourself with the people that you want to eventually emulate, at least their training. I don't know what you guys do in your personal life, but the training, I'd like to be able to squat like Chris. So I'd probably learn stuff if I wanted to know how to squat if I was around him. That's kind of how it goes.
If I train though at a commercial gym where there aren't any of the implements, and the guy gets an inkling that he wants to try strongman, what would you recommend? He's at a commercial gym. The time on, there aren't a lot of there's no monoliths. He's working out of racks. What would you suggest they work on before they actually get to work to get to the strongman implements?
Just like what their basic lift should be as far as weight wise.
Yeah, I don't have any of the tools available to me. I work out at 24-hour fitness, for example. So what should I be training if I want to start off as a strongman there?
You got a barbell, so there's a lot of stuff you can do with a barbell. So you can put stuff over your head. You can do any sort of pressing. You can bench. It's going to put on the upper body mass. You can squat your face off, and do a lot of higher reps and deadlift and all the variations are there. I'd say to add in more unilateral work, because I'm a big fan of like barbell walking lunges, because stuff like the yoke, you're driving off legs individually. So it's a little different than the squat where, you might get it, and it's good to get. It helps prevent imbalances in general, and try to, go pick up some rocks somewhere. But if you build up a good base, doing the big four, just, pressing, pull, deadlifting, squatting, benching, and doing, all the rows and the basic gym lifts, and then you actually get access to the implements, it's going to carry over. It doesn't take, then you'll be able to find it. And even if once a month you take a 2-hour drive to, like an official strongman gym, like a gym that's going to have all this stuff, and just practice on it once a month, that's going to pay off huge if you're just getting stronger at, LA Fitness or whatever in the meantime.
So that's my point. Anybody can do it if they set their mind to it.
Yeah, absolutely. You put the barriers on yourself. Like you say, oh, I'd love to do this, but I'd love to do that, but then you're never going to do it. If you go, okay, I have this and I'm going to do this, I have this, like it can be looked at as a positive or negative. I don't have everything that's in a 24-hour fitness. I train in my garage. So I could look at myself as limited in my training, but I just do what I can with what I got.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're about running up on time here, Kalle. Where can our listeners find you? I mean, we mentioned Starting Strongman. Is that the primary resource for our listeners?
Yeah, you can find pretty much, if you want to get into the sport of strongman or just kind of follow what's going on with it, you can find pretty much any of that at Starting Strongman. Got a YouTube channel. It's just Starting Strongman on YouTube, and podcast Strong Talk, and pretty much Starting Strongman across all social media.
Excellent.
All right. Well, Kalle, I think maybe we can talk a little bit more offline at some point, but I think it might be good for you and us to do perhaps some collaboration on some of our KMS content as it relates to strongman. So maybe a conversation we can continue there.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. It's been a great time talking with you today, Kalle.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise.
Thank you.